when the host of a private dinner at a luxurious Bel Air mansion smirked and said, "Women your age wouldn't last a day under real discipline. The military would break you." I said nothing. I simply took a slow sip of ice water and let him enjoy the sound of his own voice. For the next 20 minutes, Richard Sterling lectured me about military tactics, supply chains, and leadership as though he had spent his life studying them. He had no idea that the quiet woman sitting across from him in a simple silk dress was far more familiar with military discipline than he could ever imagine. I was Colonel Naomi Ward, an active-duty U.S. Army colonel responsible for thousands of personnel and major defense logistics operations. But tonight I wasn't wearing my uniform, medals, or insignia. I was simply Naomi, the girlfriend of Richard's son Julian. Richard was a wealthy real estate mogul and defense contractor. He was famous for his confidence, sharp tongue, and need to be the most powerful person in every room. Before we entered his enormous estate, Julian squeezed my hand nervously. "Please keep your military background private tonight," he whispered. "My father always needs to be the smartest person in the room. If he feels challenged, dinner could become a disaster." He also warned me that Richard often felt threatened by accomplished women. I agreed. I decided to stay quiet, support Julian, and let his father enjoy his spotlight. I didn't realize how badly Richard was about to test my patience. The dining room looked like a palace. A massive crystal chandelier hung above a long mahogany table, while Richard sat at the head as if he owned the entire world. His third wife sat quietly beside him. Julian was across from me, looking increasingly nervous whenever his father spoke. During the second course, Richard launched into a long speech about his business empire. He casually mentioned politicians, CEOs, and defense officials he claimed to know personally. From the beginning, his attitude toward me was obvious. He had looked at my quiet personality and simple silk dress and decided I was nothing more than a young woman relying on his son for an expensive lifestyle. Then the conversation shifted to military logistics. Richard leaned back, swirled his wine, and began explaining military operations to me. With complete confidence, he made mistake after mistake about military structure, readiness, deployment, and command responsibilities. I knew every one of his claims was wrong. What made it worse was his confidence. He spoke as if he were teaching a beginner, never realizing that I was responsible for the very kind of operations he was pretending to understand. Then Richard turned his criticism toward my generation. "The problem with young women today," he said, pointing his fork toward me, "is that you've never experienced real pressure. You live comfortable lives. Someone like you wouldn't survive 48 hours under genuine military discipline." I kept my expression calm. Under the table, my fingers tightened around my napkin. Julian looked at me desperately. He wanted me to smile, nod, and let the insults pass. He was afraid that challenging his father would damage their relationship and hurt his future in the family business. So I remained silent. Richard continued. He tried to explain how a brigade operated, but he misunderstood the responsibilities of commanders and confused basic military duties with strategic leadership. Every few seconds he made another mistake. And every time I said nothing. Finally, Richard placed his wineglass on the table and leaned toward me with a smug smile. "Tell me, Naomi," he said. "Since you've been so quiet, do you even know what a defense procurement contract looks like?" He laughed. "Or do you think the military runs on goodwill and magic?" He clearly expected me to stumble. He expected me to look at Julian for help. Instead, I slowly placed my glass on the table. For the first time that evening, I looked directly into Richard's eyes. He had no idea that the woman he had been lecturing was about to answer him from experience, not theory. Before I could respond, the grand dining room doors suddenly opened. Richard's butler hurried inside, looking nervous. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but General Thomas has just arrived." Richard's entire attitude changed. The arrogance disappeared instantly, replaced by excitement. General Marcus Thomas was a retired three-star general and a member of the advisory board of the defense company Richard was desperate to partner with. Winning that contract could bring Richard's company tens of millions of dollars, and he had been trying to secure the general's support for months. "Marcus. Perfect timing," Richard said, quickly standing and adjusting his expensive jacket. "We were just discussing military efficiency. Please come in." General Thomas entered the room in a perfectly tailored suit. He smiled politely at Richard. Then his eyes moved across the table. The moment he saw me, he stopped. His expression changed completely. Without even acknowledging Richard's waiting hand, General Thomas stood straight and gave me a crisp military salute. "Colonel Ward," he said firmly. "I certainly didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were back at the base overseeing your brigade's readiness evaluations." I stood and returned his salute. "General Thomas. It's good to see you, sir. I'm on weekend leave." Richard froze. His hand was still hanging uselessly in the air. "Marcus, wait." He pointed toward me, his voice suddenly shaky. "You know Naomi? She's Julian's girlfriend." General Thomas laughed softly. "Girlfriend? Richard, you're looking at Colonel Naomi Ward. She's one of the Army's most respected logistics officers." He paused. "She commands a combat sustainment brigade with more than 4,000 personnel. And there's something else you should know." Richard's face tightened. "Her unit is reviewing the defense supply proposal your company submitted last week." The room went completely silent. Julian stared at me in disbelief. Richard's face turned bright red. Suddenly everything made sense to him. The quiet woman he had spent the entire evening insulting wasn't a clueless girlfriend. She was the military commander connected to the very contract he desperately wanted. And I had been listening to his lecture the entire time. I stepped forward and calmly looked at him. "Mr. Sterling, I'd like to correct a few things from your earlier lecture." Richard swallowed hard. "A sustainment brigade doesn't operate on magic. We coordinate multiple battalion-level commands, manage complex transportation networks, and oversee hundreds of millions of dollars in military logistics." I paused. "And our procurement decisions are based on capability, compliance, and operational integrity, not personal connections." Richard looked completely defeated. "Colonel Ward," he said nervously, "I had no idea. Please accept my sincerest apology. I was only speaking in general terms. I have the highest respect for the military." Suddenly he wanted to impress me. He offered me the best seat at the table. He even reached for the wine bottle. I raised one hand. He stopped immediately. "True leadership," I said calmly, "isn't about how you treat people who can help you. It's about how you treat people when you believe they have nothing to offer you." Richard said nothing. "Good evening." I turned and walked out. Julian followed me to the car in silence. For the first time he had seen his father completely humbled. And I realized something that night. Real authority doesn't need to brag. Real confidence doesn't need to insult others. And true power doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one with the most experience. Now tell me, what would you have done in my position? Would you have corrected Richard immediately, or waited for the perfect moment? Comment below and share your thoughts.